The Nevada desert swallowed sound the way it swallowed everything else, without mercy, without memory. Heat rose from the cracked earth in shimmering waves, distorting the distant mountains into something that looked less like geology and more like a fever dream. The thermometer at the Nellis Range complex had stopped at 112 degrees 3 hours ago, as if the mercury itself had given up trying to measure something so relentless. "Drop the toy, sweetheart." Wade Harlan's voice cut across the firing line like a blade through silk. Deep Texas drawl, the kind that puts you in your place and dared you to climb back out. 220 heads turned toward the sound, toward the show that was about to unfold. The woman didn't flinch. She was kneeling at firing position 19, her back to the crowd, hands moving across a rifle with the kind of quiet precision that most people never noticed. Her name tape read Ashford, 3 chevrons on her collar, a sergeant, E5, nobody special in a sea of special operators. Her rifle case lay open beside her, a soft-sided bag that looked like it had been purchased at a sporting goods store clearance sale, fraying at one corner, zipper pull replaced with a twist of green paracord. The rifle that had emerged from that case was an M110 SAS, standard issue, government property. The kind of weapon that every shooter on this range had trained on at some point, then upgraded away from as fast as humanly possible. Wade Harlan walked closer, his entourage following like satellites orbiting a particularly confident sun. 8 men, Rangers, Green Berets, a couple of Delta operators, all wearing the easy smiles of people who'd found their entertainment for the morning. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Wade stopped 10 feet from the woman, close enough to be heard, far enough to play to his audience. "You know this isn't a flat range qual, right? This is big boy distance. Your little pea shooter's gonna run out of gas before target 4. The woman's hands paused for exactly 1 second. Then they resumed their work. Oil the bolt, check the extractor spring, inspect the firing pin, run a bore snake through the barrel. Every movement precise, flowing, automatic. The economy of motion that separates someone who maintains a weapon from someone who lives inside one. Wade's smile flickered. He was a performer. He needed the reaction, needed the flinch, the anger, the embarrassment, something to play to his crowd. The silence bothered him more than any response could have. "I'm serious, darling. Drop the toy. Save yourself the embarrassment." He gestured toward the registration table. "Maybe one of the range staff has an admin slot. You could—" "Master Sergeant," the voice came from behind Wade, low, controlled. A voice that had commanded men in places where commands meant the difference between breathing and not breathing. Wade turned. Cole Rennick stood 15 feet back, coffee cup in hand, face unreadable beneath the silver that had started threading through his hair sometime in the last 7 years. Navy SEAL, Chief Petty Officer. 14 years of service that had carved lines around his eyes and taught him to recognize things that most people missed. "Maybe let her shoot," Cole said. Wade sized him up. Rank, unit, patches, posture. SEAL Team 3. Respected, but not senior enough to tell a Marine Raiders Master Sergeant what to do. "Just having some fun, Chief. Relax." "She didn't come here for your fun." The 2 men held each other's gaze for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then they smiled, the wide, easy smile of a man who decides a fight isn't worth his time. "Fair enough." He turned back to the woman. "No offense, sweetheart. Just looking out for you." He walked away. His audience followed. The show was over, but Wade's smile had faded by the time he reached his shooting mat. Something about the look in Cole Rennick's eyes bothered him. Not anger, not challenge. Something else. Something that looked almost like warning. At position 19, Kira Ashford picked up a torque wrench and began checking her scope ring tension. 18 inch-pounds on the base, 25 on the rings. Her expression hadn't changed once during the entire encounter. Not because she was hiding her feelings, because there were no feelings to hide. She'd learned that at 16 years old, standing on a 600-yard line in Montana while boys twice her size laughed at her father's second-hand bolt-action .308. She'd outshot every single one of them that day. And the day after, and every day since, laughter was just wind. And Kira Ashford had been reading wind her whole life. 40 feet away, Cole Rennick's hands had stopped moving. He'd been adjusting his scope turrets, running through his own pre-shoot checklist when something pulled his attention sideways. Not the rifle, not the case, not the woman's silence in the face of Wade Harlan's performance. The paracord, a 6-inch length of faded green cord, knotted at one end, tied to the barrel of her M110, left to flutter in whatever breeze passed through. An improvised wind indicator, old school, almost ancient in an age of kestrel meters and ballistic computers. Cole set down his coffee, his eyes locked onto the woman at position 19 with an intensity that made the shooter next to him glance over with concern. "You good, Chief?" Cole didn't answer. He was watching her read the wind, not with instruments, not with electronics, with the paracord in her eyes, watching the flutter, calculating speed and direction the way sailors used to read the ocean, by watching the surface. He watched her open a small spiral notebook, pages so dense with handwriting they looked like they'd been typeset. Wine tables, mirage patterns, temperature data, years of field work compressed into a pocket-sized Bible. His chest tightened. A memory was pushing up from somewhere deep, fighting through 7 years of scar tissue to reach the surface. He'd seen this before. This exact ritual. This exact stillness. Where? When? The memory wouldn't fully form. Not yet. It hovered at the edge of recognition like a word on the tip of his tongue, close enough to taste but impossible to grasp. Then she reached up and adjusted the paracord, and Cole saw the color clearly for the first time. Green. Faded. Sun-bleached to something between olive and gray. And suddenly he wasn't standing on a firing range in Nevada anymore. He was lying behind a collapsed stone wall in Helmand Province, bleeding from a wound he couldn't see, listening to a voice on the radio that had no business being there. "Stay low. Stay quiet, I'll handle this." Calm. Female. Absolute. The voice of someone who had already decided that 11 strangers were worth dying for. Cole's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and hit the ground. He didn't notice, didn't hear the splash, didn't feel the hot liquid soaking into his boot. He was staring at Kira Ashford, at the M110 on its bipod, at the paracord fluttering on the barrel, at the notebook filled with wind data collected across a lifetime. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his teeth. "No," he whispered. "No way." But even as he said it, his body was already responding to what his mind hadn't fully accepted. His hands were shaking. His eyes were burning. 7 years of searching. 7 years of dead ends and classified walls and being told to drop it. 7 years of carrying a debt he couldn't repay because he didn't know who to pay it to. Could it be? Could it possibly be her? 23 years ago, on a ranch outside of Billings, a 9-year-old girl lay prone in brown grass that smelled like summer and forever. "Breathe." Her father's voice was low, steady, patient. Ray Ashford had been many things in his 46 years: soldier, husband, hunter, failure. But in this moment, teaching his daughter to shoot, he was none of those things. He was simply a man passing down what he knew to the person who mattered most. "I am breathing, Daddy." "You're holding. There's a difference. Feel your chest rise. Feel it fall. Find the pause between. That's where the shot lives." Kira closed her eyes. 9 years old, brown hair and a ponytail, twinned knee-ends from climbing the fence that morning. She breathed in. She breathed out. And she found the pause. That fraction of a second where everything goes still, where the body becomes a machine and the machine becomes an extension of will. "Now look at the target. Don't stare at it. Look through it like you're seeing something behind it." She opened her eyes. 300 yards away, a steel plate the size of a dinner plate caught the afternoon sun. "The wind's moving left to right," Ray said. "See the grass, see how it bends? That's about 8 miles per hour. Your bullet's going to drift right." "How much?" Kira calculated. She'd been doing this since she was 7, running numbers in her head while other kids were watching cartoons. 4 inches? Close, 3.5 at this range with this load. Aim left of center. Let the wind carry you home. She adjusted, settled, found the pause again. "Kira." "Yes, Daddy?" "Numbers don't lie." His voice was firm now, the voice he used when he wanted her to remember something forever. "When it lies, your eyes lie, your gut lies, But the math never lies, you understand? I understand. Good. Now show me. She pressed the trigger, not pulled, not squeezed, pressed, and the rifle cracked, and 300 yards away, steel rang. Ray Ashford smiled. It was the smile of a man who had finally found something worth passing on. Later, walking back to the truck with the rifle over her shoulder, Kira noticed her father untying something from his wrist. What's that? Paracord. Ray held it up, a length of faded green cord, weathered by years in sun and things he never talked about. I've had this since Desert Storm. Kept it tied to my rifle through the whole deployment. Became kind of a good luck charm, I guess. Did it work? Ray was quiet for a moment. I came home. A lot of men didn't. So yeah, maybe it worked. He knelt down, took Kira's hand, and tied the paracord around her wrist. Loose enough to be comfortable. Tight enough to stay. Now it's yours. Daddy, I can't take you're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference. He stood, looked down at her with eyes that held something she wouldn't understand for another 20 years. One day you're going to need something to hold on to. Something to remind you where you came from and what you're made of. When that day comes, you look at that cord and you remember. You're Ray Ashford's daughter. And Ray Ashford's daughter doesn't miss. Kira looked at the paracord on her wrist. Faded green, sun-bleached, older than she was. I won't miss, Daddy. I know you won't, sweetheart. I know you won't. 5 years later, Ray Ashford died of a heart attack in the same field where he'd taught Kira to shoot. She was 14 years old. She found him lying in the brown grass, face turned toward the sky, expression peaceful in a way it had never been in life. She held him for 2 hours before the ambulance came. Held him and talked to him and told him about the shot she'd made that morning. 800 yards, crosswind, moving target. I didn't miss, Daddy, she whispered. I didn't miss. The paracord was still on her wrist when they buried him. It was still on her wrist when she enlisted at 18. It was still on her wrist when she qualified for sniper school at 22, one of the first women to ever complete the course. And it was tied to the barrel of her rifle now, 23 years after a 9-year-old girl lay in brown grass and learned that numbers don't lie. Some things you carry forever. Some things carry you. Cole Rennick had been searching for 7 years. It had started the day after the extraction when he'd walked into his commanding officer's office and asked a simple question. Who was the sniper on that mountain? The answer had been immediate, final, and utterly unsatisfying. Classified. Drop it, Chief. He hadn't dropped it. In the first year, he'd filed 4 Freedom of Information Act requests. All denied. He'd called in favors from friends in intelligence, from contacts at JSOC, from a former teammate who'd gone to work for the CIA. Nothing. Every door closed, every lead dead. In the second year, he'd started keeping a file. Handwritten notes, timelines, theories, everything he could remember about those 60 hours on the mountain, every detail about the voice on the radio that had kept them alive. Wraith, she'd called herself. Wraith Overwatch. Female, young, American, calm in a way that went beyond training, beyond experience, into something that might have been called faith if faith could pull a trigger. In the third year, his wife found the file. They'd been married for 8 years by then. 2 deployments, 1 miscarriage, 1 daughter who was learning to walk and talk and look at her father with eyes that expected him to be there. What is this? Sarah had asked, holding up the notebook filled with his obsessive scrawling. A debt, Cole had told her. One I can't repay until I know who I owe. Cole, it's been 3 years. Maybe it's time to... She saved my life, Sarah. She saved 11 lives. She spent 60 hours on a frozen mountain without food or water, in temperatures that should have killed her. And she did it for strangers. For men she'd never met. And then she disappeared like it never happened. Like she didn't matter. Like what she did wasn't worth remembering. His voice had cracked. He'd caught it, rebuilt it, pushed on. I can't let that stand. I won't. Sarah had been quiet for a long time. Then she'd handed back the notebook and said, find her. In the 4th year, Cole had tracked down every female sniper in the U.S. military. There weren't many. He'd eliminated them one by one based on deployment records, physical descriptions, timeline conflicts. None of them matched. In the fifth year, he'd started to wonder if she'd been military at all. Maybe CIA, maybe a contractor, maybe something so classified that it didn't exist in any database he could access. In the sixth year, he'd almost given up. Almost. And now, standing on a firing range in Nevada, watching a woman tie a piece of faded green paracord to the barrel of an M110 rifle, Cole Rennick felt 7 years of searching collapse into a single burning question. Is it you? He opened his notebook, the same notebook he'd started keeping in year 2, now fat with 7 years of accumulated data, and flipped to a page he'd written the day after the extraction. At the top, in his own handwriting, Wraith, unknown female sniper, Helmand Province, March 2019. 60 hours continuous engagement, 27 confirmed kills, 11 lives saved. Below it, a list of characteristics he'd compiled from memory, from the radio calls, from the impossible shots he'd tracked from the valley floor. Uses M110 platform. Reads wind without instruments. Paracord indicator. Old school. Carries handwritten data notebooks. Calm voice. Young. American. Extraordinary range estimation. Extraordinary wind calculation. Works alone. Disappears without trace. Cole looked up from the notebook. Looked at position 19. At Kira Ashford, who was checking her rifle one final time, with hands that moved like they'd been doing this since the beginning of time. Every single item on his list was staring him in the face. The PA system crackled across the Nellis Range complex like thunder announcing a coming storm. All shooters, listen up. Final event, the Dragon's Spine. Report to the main firing line for briefing in 5 minutes. I say again, 5 minutes. Everything shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Men straightened, hands tightened on rifle cases. The Dragon's Spine wasn't just another stage in the competition. It was the reason most of them had come. The test that created legends or destroyed reputations. The Rangemaster stepped onto a raised platform. A retired command sergeant major, face like cracked leather, voice like someone had lined his throat with gravel and lit it on fire. Listen close because I'm only saying this once, or 220 faces stared back at him. The Dragon's Spine, 8 targets, ranges from 750 meters to 2,100 meters. He let that last number sit. 2,100 meters, 1.3 miles, a distance that pushed the limits of what precision rifle fire could achieve. Engage in sequence, 12-minute time window from first shot. Wind in this valley is a living nightmare, variable 8 to 22 miles per hour, direction shifts with thermal cycles every 90 seconds. He looked out at the crowd. If your rifle can't reach 2,100 meters, withdraw now, no shame. 11 shooters stepped back immediately. Their calibers couldn't make the distance. They knew it. Better to bow out with dignity than fail publicly. Targets 1 through 7, steel plates, 10 to 16 inches, partially obscured by terrain features. Target 8, 2,100 meters. That's a 10-inch plate at 1.3 miles. Dead silence. 209 shooters doing the same math in their heads. A 10-inch plate at that range, in these conditions. You were asking your rifle and your ammunition to do things that physics barely permitted. Bullet drop will be in the neighborhood of 700 inches. That's 58 feet. Wind drift could exceed 24 inches. The Earth's rotation becomes a factor. He paused, looked at them the way a priest looks at a congregation before delivering bad news. This is not a competition. This is a test of whether you can deliver when everything says you can't. Wade Harlan signed up first. Bold letters, confident hand. He turned to his audience. This is why you bring a real cannon, boys. His rifle was a custom build worth more than most cars. Surgeon scalpel action, Bartlett barrel, Night Force attacker optics, chambered in .300 Norma Magnum, a cartridge specifically designed to reach out and touch targets at distances that made other calibers weep. $22,000 of precision engineering, and Wade handled it like it was an extension of his body. Then Kira stepped forward. The crowd parted, not out of respect, out of curiosity, the way people step back from someone walking toward the edge of a cliff. She picked up the pen, wrote in small, precise handwriting, SGT K. Ashford, USA. Set the pen down. walked back to position 19. 3 seconds of silence. Then Wade laughed, loud, but the edges of it were ragged now, something he couldn't quite control. Spirit, she's got spirit, I'll give her that. She's going to embarrass herself, one of the Rangers said. She already has, said another. But Cole Rennick, standing at the back of the crowd with his arms crossed, wasn't laughing. He was watching Kira walk away, watching the set of her shoulders, the rhythm of her stride, the absolute absence of doubt in every step she took. And the memory that had been fighting to surface all morning finally broke through. 7 years ago, Helmand Province, the worst night of his life, crouched behind a stone wall with 10 men who were running out of ammunition and hope. The radio crackling to life. Dagger 6. This is Wraith. Stay low. Stay quiet. I'll handle this. Cole's hands went cold. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his teeth. It's you, he whispered, so quietly that not even the man standing next to him could hear. My God, it's you. Wade Harlan's name was called first for the dragon's spine. He went prone behind his $22,000 rifle with the ease of a man who'd done this 10,000 times. His spotter settled beside him, Kestrel meter deployed, wind readings flowing, data streaming. Shooter ready? Ready? Commence firing. Target 1, 750 meters. Boom. Hit. Target 2, 950 meters. Boom. Hit. Targets 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, each one falling in sequence like dominoes pushed by a master hand. Wade moved with fluid precision, fast, confident, undeniably skilled. The crowd watched with genuine admiration. Whatever else Wade Harlan was, arrogant, loud, condescending, the man could shoot. 7 for 7, his spotter called. 3 minutes 40 remaining. Target 8, 2,100 meters. The impossible distance. Wade settled in. His spotter worked the Kestrel. 1 variable, 14, quartering right. Wait, gust to 19, shifting back to 11. Wade dialed, held, breathed, squeezed. Boom. The .300 Norma Magnum sent a shockwave across the firing line. Dust erupted 4 feet left of the target. Miss, Wade cursed under his breath. Adjusted, fired again, high and right. Miss, again, low and left. Miss. The timer beeped. 12 minutes expired. Wade stood. His jaw was tight, his eyes were flat, but he forced the grin, the performer's grin, the one that said nothing bothered him even when everything did. Wins a witch today, boys. 2,100 in these thermals? That's a coin flip. The crowd nodded, understanding. 7 of 8 was impressive. Nobody could fight the wind, but something had cracked behind Wade Harlan's eyes. Something small. Something he'd spent 15 years building and had just watched chip at the edges. He was supposed to be the best. The best didn't miss. Over the next 2 hours, 14 more shooters tried the dragon's spine. The best score, 7 of 8, achieved 3 times. Nobody hit target 8. Not once. Not even close. The shooters started calling it the ghost target. 2,100 meters. 1.3 miles. A 10-inch plate shimmering in heat mirage like a hallucination. Untouchable. Impossible. A mountain that couldn't be climbed. Cole Rennick watched from his position, rifle untouched, mind elsewhere. He wasn't thinking about the competition. He was thinking about a frozen ridge in Afghanistan, 7 years ago. He was thinking about a voice on the radio that had said, "I'll handle this," and then proceeded to dismantle an army. He was thinking about the woman at position 19, who hadn't moved in 2 hours, who sat perfectly still, with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes fixed on some middle distance that nobody else could see. Waiting, patient, like she'd been waiting her whole life. The radio had been dead for 11 minutes. Cole Rennick pressed his back against the collapsed stone wall and counted his men. 11, including himself. 3 were bleeding. 1, his best breacher, a kid from Ohio who'd just turned 24, was unconscious, face the color of wet cement. "How many rounds we got left?" Torres, his second in command, didn't look up from the tourniquet he was tying around his own thigh. "Maybe 4 mags between all of us. 5 if you count the pistol rounds." "And them?" Torres finally looked up. His eyes said everything his mouth didn't want to. 180, maybe 200, coming from three sides. Chief, they've got us boxed. Cole closed his eyes. He had a daughter, 6 weeks old, born while he was on a transport plane somewhere over the Atlantic. His wife had texted him a photo, a tiny pink face wrapped in a white blanket. He'd saved it to his phone. He'd never held that baby. He was starting to accept that he never would. Get on that radio again. Try every frequency. Chief, I've been trying for... Try again? Torres grabbed the handset. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking so hard the antenna rattled against the stone. Any station, any station. This is Dagger 6 Actual. We are pinned at grid reference. Nothing. Static. Wind howling through the valley like something alive. Something hungry. Cole tried the radio one more time. His voice had changed. The command tone was gone. This was a man making peace with what was coming. Any station. This is Dagger 6 Actual. We are pinned. 3 casualties. Estimate 180 to 200 enemy fighters closing from 3 sides. No air support. No QRF available. He paused. Swallowed. We are going to die down here. He released the transmit button, looked at his men. Some were praying. One was writing something in a small notebook. A letter, probably. Last words for someone back home. Then the radio crackled. Dagger 6. This is Wraith. Cole grabbed the handset so fast he nearly dropped it. Say again. Who is this? Wraith Overwatch. I have eyes on your position. The voice was calm, not the forced calm of someone trying to sound brave. The genuine calm of still water. And it was unmistakably female. Torres looked at Cole. Cole looked at Torres. Neither of them spoke. Count your souls, Dagger 6, the voice continued. Cole's finger pressed the transmit button. Wraith, whoever you are, we have no Overwatch asset assigned to this operation. Identify yourself. You do now. A pause. 3 seconds. Then, I count 11 souls, 3 wounded, 1 critical, 6 enemy positions preparing to advance on your east flank, 2 more staging to your south. You have approximately 18 minutes before they're on top of you. Cole's mind raced. This wasn't in the plan. There was no sniper support for this mission. They were supposed to have air coverage, but the weather had grounded everything. Wraith, I need your credentials. I need... The voice cut through his words like a blade through paper. Still calm, still gentle, but absolute. I'm not supposed to be here, Chief. I made a decision that nobody authorized. I moved 3 hours across frozen terrain in the dark to reach this ridge. No orders, no mission, just a choice. Another pause. Stay low, stay quiet. I'll handle this. Cole opened his mouth to respond, to demand identification, to follow protocol, to do any of the 100 things his training told him to do. Instead, he said, Copy, Wraith. We're staying low. He didn't know why. Something in that voice, something that made him believe. 1,400 meters above the valley floor, Kira Ashford lay flat on a rock shelf barely wide enough for her body. Ice had formed on her eyelashes. Her lips were split and bleeding. She'd wrapped strips of torn cloth around her fingers to keep them from freezing to the rifle's metal. She was 25 years old. She'd been in position for 6 hours already, tracking movement through the valley below. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her original tasking had been Overwatch for a different operation, 12 kilometers east. A routine mission. Standard support. Nothing that would challenge her skills or test her limits. But she'd heard the chatter. She'd heard the panic in the voices of men who never panicked. Dagger 6 is pinned. No QRF available. Weather's grounded everything. They're going to die down there. And Kira had made a decision. She'd moved 3 hours across frozen terrain in the dark, navigating by memory and starlight, hauling her M110 and 60 rounds of ammunition up a mountain that would have challenged a fresh climber in daylight. She'd done it exhausted, dehydrated, running on nothing but training and something deeper. Something that didn't have a name but felt like the weight of her father's paracord against her wrist. Now she lay on that ridge and watched through her scope as nearly 200 Taliban fighters closed on 11 Americans who had no idea she existed. She ran the math, not on paper, not on a device. In her head, the way her father had taught her. Numbers don't lie, Kira. Range, 1,280 meters. Wind, crosswind, gusting 15 to 22 miles per hour. Temperature -4 Celsius. Altitude 9,200 feet. Thin air, less drag. Bullet flies flatter but drops differently. She made the adjustments, not consciously, the way a concert pianist doesn't consciously think about which finger hits which key. 12,000 hours behind a scope had turned calculation into instinct. Through the scope, she'd been watching one figure for 90 seconds, taller than the others, dark clothing, moving with authority, pointing, directing, sending groups of fighters forward in coordinated waves. The field commander, breath in, long, slow, filling the lungs completely. Breath out, controlled release, not forced, letting the air leave naturally. And then the pause, the sacred space between exhale and inhale where the human body is perfectly still. No heartbeat disruption, no respiratory movement. A fraction of a second where shooter and rifle become a single system. Her finger pressed the trigger. Not pulled, not squeezed, pressed. Constant, even pressure. So gradual that the shot's break was a surprise even to her. The rifle cracked. 1,280 meters away, the Taliban field commander dropped mid-gesture, his arms still raised, still pointing. When his body simply ceased to function, the men around him froze, then scattered, spinning, searching, screaming into their radios. They couldn't find the shooter. The distance was too great. The sound had echoed off 3 different cliff faces, making the shot's origin impossible to determine. To them, it was as if God himself had reached down and removed their leader. Kira was already on the next target, a sub-commander, the one who tried to take over. She could see him grabbing a radio, shouting, trying to rally the scattered fighters. Range, 1,190 meters. Wind shifting. She adjusted, pressed. The sub-commander fell. In the valley below, inside the stone walls where 11 men waited to die, the captured Taliban radio frequency erupted with chaos. Cole Rennick understood enough Pashto to catch fragments. The devil's eye, a spirit, a jinn on the mountain. We cannot see. We cannot fight what we cannot see. Torres stared at the radio. Chief, what the hell is happening out there? Cole looked up at the mountain. Somewhere up there, in the darkness, in the ice, in the howling wind, a woman he'd never met was dismantling an army. An angel, he said quietly. An angel is happening. The siege lasted 60 hours. 60 hours on a frozen ridge with no water after hour 32. No food, no relief. Kira fired 29 rounds total, 27 confirmed kills. 2 misses, both caused by wind gusts that exceeded 30 miles per hour mid-flight, turning her bullets into dice rolling through the sky. By hour 40, she was hallucinating, seeing shapes in the rocks, hearing her father's voice. Steady, girl, breathe. The rifle doesn't care if you're tired. Give it what it needs. By hour 50, her body was shutting down, core temperature dropping, fingers barely functional. She'd bitten through her own lip to stay conscious during one engagement. She kept shooting. Every shot targeted leadership. Squad leaders, weapons team commanders, anyone who tried to organize the attack. She wasn't just killing fighters, she was killing the enemy's ability to think. The Taliban tried to advance twice. Both times, the moment a leader stood up to direct the movement, he went down. By the second attempt, nobody was willing to lead. The fighters were leaderless, terrified, convinced they were facing something beyond human. They would refuse to mass forces in the open for 2 full fighting seasons after that night. Because of one woman on a mountain, because of Wraith. At hour 58, the weather broke. A 40-minute window in the storm. 2 Blackhawks and a Chinook punched through and extracted all 11 SEALs. Wounded, some critically, but breathing, every single one. Cole Rennick was the last man on the helicopter. As the Black Hawk lifted off, banking hard against the wind, he looked up at the mountain through the open door. He saw her, a tiny figure on the ridge, barely distinguishable from the rock. A silhouette that looked less like a person and more like a piece of the mountain itself. As he watched, the figure collapsed, just folded onto the stone like a puppet with its strings cut. Cole raised his hand, shaking, exhausted, bleeding from a wound he hadn't even felt until that moment. He held his hand up in a slow salute toward the mountain. The figure didn't move. couldn't move. She was already unconscious. She would be found 6 hours later by a recovery team. Hypothermic, frostbitten, nerve damage in her trigger finger that would take 6 months of rehabilitation. She would spend 3 days on IV fluids. She would lose 2 toenails to frostbite. She would carry the scars on her fingers for the rest of her life. Her name did not appear in any after-action report. The mission was classified above top secret. The 11 men she saved were debriefed separately and told in clear terms that the sniper who had saved their lives did not officially exist. But Cole Rennick couldn't let it go. He asked everyone, his commanding officer, the intelligence liaison, the operations planner, anyone who might know, who was the sniper on that mountain? Who was Wraith? The same answer every time. Classified. Drop it, Chief. He didn't drop it. For 7 years until today. The range master's voice cut through the Nevada heat. Next shooter, Sergeant Ashford. The crowd didn't leave. Every single one of them stayed. Not because they expected success, because they expected failure. And failure, especially spectacular failure, was the best show on the range. Kira walked to the line, knelt, unpacked her M110, went prone. Her body settled into position the way water finds a channel. No forcing, no adjustment, just arrival. She closed her eyes. 3 seconds. When she opened them, every trace of the world outside the rifle had ceased to exist. Shooter ready? Ready. Commence firing. Target 1, 750 meters. She watched the mirage through the scope, read the heat waves, waited for the pattern. Her finger pressed, constant even until the shot broke on its own. Crack, ping, hit, target 2, 950 meters. Crack, ping, hit. Target 3, 1,100 meters. Crack, ping, hit. She didn't pause between shots. The M110's semi-automatic action gave her a rhythm that bolt-action shooters couldn't touch. Each shot flowed into the next like notes in a melody written before she was born. Target 4, 1,300 meters. Crack, ping, hit. Target 5, 1,450 meters. Crack, ping, hit. The crowd had stopped talking. Target 6, 1,600 meters. Crack, ping, hit. Target 7, 1,800 meters. Crack, ping, hit. 7 for 7. Flawless, faster than Wade, faster than anyone who'd shot that day. The electronic timer displayed. Time remaining, 4 minutes, 52 seconds. Wade Harlan's face had gone the color of old cement. His jaw was working, but nothing was coming out. His hands had clenched into fists at his sides. The crowd was locked in now, leaning forward, holding breath they didn't realize they were holding. And Cole Rennick, standing at the back with his eyes fixed on position 19, was no longer wondering. He knew. He knew. Target 8, 2,100 meters. The ghost target, 1.3 miles. A 10-inch plate dancing in heat mirage like something that existed only in dreams. Kira stared through the scope. She already knew the math. 7.62 NATO at 2,100 meters. The bullet would go transonic at 1,700 meters. It would lose stability, begin to tumble, become unpredictable. Her rifle could not make this shot. The physics were as clear and final as gravity. She fired anyway. Crack. Dust erupted 8 feet right of the target. A ranging shot. Information gathering. She adjusted. Fired. Closer. 5 feet left. Again. 4 feet right. The bullet was tumbling now. A coin spinning through the air, no longer flying true. Time remaining, 1 minute, 10 seconds. The crowd murmured, sympathetic, respectful, but sympathetic. She was trying, it was admirable, but the rifle simply could not do what she was asking it to do. And then Kira heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming straight toward her. She didn't turn, didn't need to. She felt the weight of them through the ground. The crowd parted. Cole Rennick walked through the gap. His face was pale beneath the desert sunburn. His jaw was set tight, but his eyes were burning with something that had been building for 7 years. In his hands, he carried his rifle, the M110K1, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, a cartridge that could reach 2,100 meters and still fly true. He knelt beside her, set the rifle on her mat, deployed the bipod. Then he reached into his vest pocket and produced a single brass cartridge, hand-loaded, match-grade, the best round that knowledge and skill could produce. He placed it beside the rifle. 209 shooters watched in complete silence. Cole's voice came out rough, strained at the edges, barely above a whisper. "Try mine, Sergeant Major." The words hit the crowd like a bomb detonating in a church. Sergeant Major. She was wearing 3 chevrons. E5. A sergeant. But this SEAL, this chief petty officer who'd served 14 years in the most elite unit in the Navy, had just called her Sergeant Major. E9. The highest enlisted rank in the United States Army. Wade Harlan took one step back. His face had gone white beneath the sunburn. Kira looked up from the rifle. Her eyes met Cole's. And in that space, that fraction of a second where two people recognize each other across years and distance and classified walls and unanswered prayers, something cracked open that neither of them could close. "I've been looking for you for 7 years, Cole said. His voice was barely holding together. "Wraith." Kira's hands went still on the rifle. For the first time all day, for the first time anyone on this range had seen, something moved behind her eyes. A wall shifted, a door opened. Just a crack. "Dagger 6, she said quietly. 7 years of searching, 7 years of hoping, all of it rushed to the surface at once. Cole's composure finally broke. "You made it home, Chief," Kira said. "All 11 of you. That's what matters." "Because of you." Cole's voice was raw. 60 hours. No food. No water after the first day. Frostbite. Hypothermia. You almost died up there. Almost doesn't count. It counts to me. He pointed at the rifle. "Now finish what you started." Kira looked at the M110K1, a rifle she'd never touched in her life, a weapon that belonged to a stranger who'd spent 7 years searching for a ghost. "I can't take your rifle, Chief." "You're not taking it. I'm giving it." Cole's voice was firm now, steady despite the emotion. "There's a difference." The words hit Kira like a punch to the chest. "You're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference." Her father's voice, her father's words, spoken in a field in Montana 23 years ago when he'd tied a piece of faded green paracord around a 9-year-old girl's wrist. She looked at Cole Rennick, at this man who'd spent 7 years carrying a debt he couldn't repay, searching for a woman who didn't want to be found, driven by a gratitude so deep it had become the organizing principle of his life. She gave one small nod. Cole stood, stepped back, crossed his arms. Time remaining, 48 seconds. One bullet, one shot at a target nobody on this range could hit, and 209 men holding their breath like their lives depended on it. 48 seconds, one bullet, 2,100 meters of scorching air between Kira Ashford and a 10-inch steel plate that no one on this range had been able to touch, her cheek pressed against the stock of a rifle she'd never fired. The scope picture was different from her M110, sharper, more magnification. The reticle hash marks spaced for a cartridge with twice the reach of her own, a stranger's instrument. But the fundamentals were the same. They were always the same. Breathe, calculate, press. She ran the math. 300 Winchester Magnum. Muzzle velocity, 2,950 feet per second. Ballistic coefficient of the hand-loaded bullet, 0.720. Elevation required, 61 minutes of angle. Bullet drop at 2,100 meters, 680 inches, 56 feet. The bullet would arc 90 feet above the line of sight at its apex, then fall like a stone thrown off a building. Wind drift at current conditions, 20 inches right. Thermal updraft from the valley floor pushing left, 6 inches. Net drift, 14 right. Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, 2.5 MOSA right. Spin drift, 1.8 MOA right. Air temperature, 112 degrees. Thin air, low density. Bullet flies faster, flatter. Adjust elevation, down 1 MOA. Now, all of this happened in 3 seconds. Not conscious thought, instinct. 12,000 hours compressed into a single automatic process that bypassed her thinking mind entirely and spoke directly to her hands. She dialed the turrets. Click, click, click. Each adjustment precise, confident, no hesitation, no second guessing, no rechecking. Behind her, 209 men stood frozen. Some had their mouths open. Some were gripping their own rifles like railings on a sinking ship. Wade Harlan hadn't blinked in 30 seconds. Cole Rennick stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, lips moving silently. The same two words over and over. Come on, come on, come on. Kira found her natural respiratory pause. The sacred space between breaths where the body achieves perfect stillness. No heartbeat disruption, no muscular tremor. The space where the rifle and the shooter and the spinning earth become a single closed system. And everything else, the crowd, the heat, the pressure, the 7 years of silence, falls away like dead leaves. Her finger began its press on the trigger. Slow, even. A pressure so gradual that the break would be a surprise even to her. That was the design. If she knew when the shot would fire, she'd flinch. The body would betray her at the last possible moment. So she surrendered control. Let the trigger decide. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, with her father's paracord tied to the barrel and her father's words echoing in her mind, Kira Ashford pressed the trigger of a rifle she'd never touched and sent a bullet toward a target that physics said couldn't be hit. The rifle fired. The sound was different from her M110. Deeper, heavier, a voice instead of a whisper. The recoil drove into her shoulder, firm, authoritative, and she rode it the way a surfer rides a wave. No resistance, no fight, just acceptance. Through the scope, she watched. 3.4 seconds. The longest 3.4 seconds in the lives of every person on that range. The bullet climbed. It left the muzzle at 2,950 feet per second, faster than the speed of sound by nearly 3 times. It climbed through the superheated air, rising along an arc calculated by a woman who'd been doing this math since she was old enough to hold a rifle. At its apex, it was 90 feet above the line of sight, a bullet in the sky, invisible, silent to the target, obeying nothing but physics and the will of the person who'd launched it. Then it began to fall. At 1,700 meters, it went transonic, broke the sound barrier in reverse. The shockwave caused a wobble, a brief, sickening moment where the bullet's stability flickered like a candle in wind. This was where most shots died. This was where the ghost target earned its name. The transonic zone was a graveyard for bullets, a place where imperfections in the round, the barrel, the load, any imperfection at all, got amplified into a miss. But this bullet was hand-loaded by Cole Rennick, a man who'd spent 7 years obsessing over a debt he couldn't repay, a man who loaded every round as if his life depended on it. Because once it had, the bullet was perfect, balanced, concentric to within 1,000th of an inch. It held. Wind caught it, pushed right. A thermal from the valley floor pushed left. The forces wrestled, shoved, negotiated, and nearly canceled each other out. Nearly, not perfectly, but close enough. Close enough for a shooter who'd calculated the net drift to the inch. 2,100 meters downrange, the 10-inch white steel plate waited. Dancing in mirage, a ghost in a furnace, a target that 15 of the best snipers in America had thrown everything they had at and missed. The bullet descended, converged, arrived. Clang! A metallic ring rolled across the valley. Not loud, not dramatic, just a sound. A clear, clean, undeniable sound that carried across the desert like a church bell in an empty town. The electronic scoring system spoke in a flat, mechanical voice that didn't know or care about the history it was recording. Target 8 hit. Center mass. Time elapsed. 11 minutes 51 seconds. Silence. Not the silence of surprise. Not the silence of a crowd processing what it just saw. This was the silence of a world breaking. The silence of 209 certainties shattering at the same instant. Like a window hit by a stone, the cracks spreading outward in every direction at once. 4 seconds. Nobody moved. Then a green beret at the back of the crowd took off his hat, held it against his chest, stared at the ground as if the earth might offer an explanation. A ranger put both hands on top of his head, fingers laced, eyes closed. The posture of a man watching something he cannot believe and cannot deny. A seal started laughing, not joy, shock with sound. The kind of laughter that comes when your brain short circuits and your body has to do something, anything, to release the pressure. Wade Harlan's mouth was open. His face was the color of wet ash. He looked at his $22,000 rifle, then at the M110K1 lying in front of a woman he'd called sweetheart 3 hours ago, then at his rifle again. Something behind his eyes was collapsing, not his confidence, something deeper. The entire architecture of his identity, the gear, the swagger, the hierarchy, crumbling like a sandcastle hit by a wave. Cole Rennick didn't move, didn't make a sound. He stood with his arms at his sides, shoulders back, the posture of a man finally at peace with something he'd carried for 7 years. She was real. She was right there. And she'd just done the impossible. Again. Then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that don't ask permission because they don't need to. Every head turned. Lieutenant General Victor Grayson was walking across the active firing line. 3 stars on his collar, catching the Nevada sun. Back straight, jaw set, moving with the absolute unhurried authority of a man who had commanded special operations forces in 5 theaters of war and answered to exactly 4 people on the planet. 2 range safety officers moved to intercept. The range was technically still hot. Protocol demanded. Grayson raised one hand, a single gesture. The range officers stopped, stepped back, swallowed whatever they were about to say, and swallowed it hard. The crowd parted, not slowly, instantly. I saw be done easily in the way water parts for a ship's bow. 209 of the most elite soldiers in the United States military pressing backward to clear a path for a 3-star general who was walking toward a sergeant kneeling in the dirt. Grayson passed Cole first, stopped. Their eyes met. Well done, Chief Rennick. Cole's voice was steady now, grounded. I just gave her the right tools, sir. She did the impossible part. Indeed she did. Grayson continued walking. His path took him directly past Wade Harlan. He stopped, looked at the Marine Master Sergeant, said nothing. The silence between them was heavier than a loaded rifle. Grayson's eyes held no anger. Something worse. Disappointment. The quiet, measured, devastating disappointment of a leader who had expected better from someone capable of better and had been let down in the most public way possible. Wade tried to hold the gaze, made it 2 seconds, 3. Then his eyes dropped to the ground. His jaw clenched so hard the muscles in his neck corded like rope. His face flooded with something far beyond embarrassment. Shame. The real kind. The kind that reaches into your chest and rearranges the furniture. Grayson held the look for 5 full seconds, then moved on, didn't need to say a word. The silence had said everything. He stopped in front of Kira. She was already rising, coming to attention, proper protocol for a general officer. Heels together, hands at her sides, chin up, the posture drilled into her since basic training, automatic as breathing. Grayson raised his hand. As you were, Sergeant Major. The words detonated, not figuratively. The impact was physical. Men flinched, heads snapped, jaws dropped. The staff sergeant at the registration table grabbed the arm of the range safety officer next to him and squeezed hard enough to leave marks. Sergeant Major, from a 3-star general. Not a mistake, not a slip. Deliberate, precise. A man who chose every word the way a surgeon chooses a scalpel. Confirming what Cole Rennick had already revealed. That the woman standing in front of them was not a sergeant, had never been a sergeant, was in fact the highest-ranking enlisted soldier most of them would ever stand this close to. Grayson turned to face the assembled crowd. His voice, when he spoke, carried across the firing line without amplification. The voice of a man who had commanded thousands in combat and never once needed a microphone. For 3 days, I have watched this competition. I have seen a great deal of expensive equipment. I have witnessed a great deal of pride. Pause. The kind of pause that makes men stop breathing. Some of it earned, most of it not. Nobody moved. You saw this soldier arrive today. You saw her standard-issue rifle. You saw her lack of custom gear. You saw her lack of fanfare. And you made assumptions. His eyes swept the crowd, making contact one face at a time. You judge the book by its cover. You didn't even bother to read the first page. His voice dropped. The crowd leaned in. They couldn't help it. When a three-star general lowers his voice, the world leans in. Let me read it for you. He straightened. Full parade ground posture. Every word that followed landed like a hammer on an anvil. This is Sergeant Major Kira Ashford, United States Army. Serial number classified. Assignment classified. Gasps. Real physical gasps. The kind that come from the gut, not the throat. The long-range engagement protocols that every one of you studied to qualify for this event. The high-altitude wind correction formulas, the thin atmosphere ballistic compensation models, the temperature coefficient adjustments. He paused, let it build. She didn't study them, she wrote them. The shock was visible. Men stepping back as if they'd been shoved. A Delta operator sitting on an ammo crate stood up so fast the crate flipped behind him. Field Manual 3-22.10. Chapter 7, written by Sergeant Major Ashford, based on field data she collected during combat operations in Afghanistan, validated through direct application. Grayson's voice changed, quieter, heavier. The voice of a man delivering testimony, not a briefing. On a frozen mountain ridge at 9,200 feet, over 60 hours of continuous engagement, single-handedly holding back nearly 200 enemy fighters, saving the lives of 11 men. He let the weight settle on them, watched it press down. 11 men who every one of you would call heroes. Grayson told them the story. Helmand Province, March 2019. The compromised SEAL team. The 180 Taliban fighters closing from three sides. No air support, no quick reaction force. 11 men waiting to die in a dry riverbed, and a 25-year-old woman who wasn't assigned to that mission, who had no orders, no authorization, who moved 3 hours across frozen terrain in darkness to reach a ridge where she would spend 60 hours without food, without water after the first 32, in temperatures that froze the metal of her rifle to her skin, holding back an army with 29 rounds in a will that refused to break. 27 confirmed kills, Grayson said. Everyone a leadership target. She didn't just fight them. She dismantled their command structure, made them believe they were being hunted by something supernatural. He paused. The Taliban called her the Devil's Eye. They refused to mass forces in the open for 2 full fighting seasons after that engagement. 2 seasons, because of one woman on a mountain. The crowd was no longer a crowd. It was a congregation. Men were standing with their hands at their sides, rigid, faces locked in expressions that ranged from awe to devastation to the raw, unprocessed shame of having misjudged someone so completely. Grayson looked at Cole. Chief Petty Officer Rennick was one of those 11 men. Every head turned. Cole stood straight, shoulders back, the posture of a man who had finally found what he'd been searching for. He spent 7 years trying to find her. 7 years trying to find the woman who saved his life. Trying to find Wraith Overwatch. Grayson's voice softened, just barely. Just enough to prove that 3 stars on your collar doesn't make you bulletproof against the things that actually matter. Trying to say 2 words, thank you. He looked at Kira, then at Cole, then at the space between them, the space that had been 7 years wide and was now measured in feet. Today, he found her. Then Grayson said something that would stay with every man on that range for the rest of their lives. Sergeant Major Ashford has been invisible for 7 years. Her name appears in no after-action report. Her service record shows nothing that would suggest what she's accomplished. She has received no medal, no commendation, no public recognition of any kind. He paused. Not because the military hid her. Not because we classified her into silence. Not because the system failed to recognize her contributions. Another pause. Longer. Because she chose it. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. She chose to remain invisible. She chose to let her work speak for itself. She chose to write the manuals that made you better without ever asking for credit. She chose to save 11 lives and then disappear into the shadows as if it had never happened. Grayson looked at Kira. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to exist. The quote hit the crowd like a physical force. Men were nodding, some were wiping their eyes, others were staring at their own expensive rifles with expressions of profound reassessment. That's what I learned from Sergeant Major Ashford, Grayson continued. That's what she taught me when she was 16 years old, standing on a firing line in Montana, asking if the Army would ever let women be real snipers. He smiled. Small, private, a memory surfacing. I told her to work hard enough, and I'd make sure the Army found a place for her. He looked at her. She worked hard enough. God, did she work hard enough. The crowd began to break apart slowly, the way ice breaks on a river in spring. Reluctantly, in pieces, not sure of the new shape it's supposed to take. Men drifted into small clusters, voices low, heads close together, the conversations all orbiting the same center of gravity. One shot, a cold rifle she'd never touched. The protocols in 322.10. She wrote them, she wrote the manual we studied to get here. 60 hours on a mountain, no food, no water after the first 32. Who does that? She does. Apparently she does. Then footsteps, different from Grayson's. Slower, heavier. The footsteps of a man walking towards something he didn't want to face but couldn't run from. Wade Harlan. The crowd noticed. Conversation stopped mid-word. Every eye tracked Wade as he approached position 19. His face was wrong, the confidence stripped away, the swagger gone, leaving behind something raw and exposed. The face of a man who'd been turned inside out in public and was still trying to figure out which parts to put back. He stopped 6 feet from Kira, opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Tried again. Sergeant Major, His voice failed. Not from emotion, though emotion was there. From the sheer weight of what he needed to say and the inadequacy of any words he could find to say it. Kira turned, looked at him. Her expression was neutral. Not cold, not warm. The face of a woman who'd heard every version of doubt and dismissal the world could produce and had long ago stopped keeping score. I was arrogant, Wade said. The words came out like rocks being pulled from his throat. I was arrogant, and I was cruel, and I couldn't see past my own ego. You saw what you expected to see, Kira said. Most people do. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. Wade looked at the ground, then at his hands, then at the woman standing in front of him. I've been the best shooter in every room I've walked into for 15 years. That became my identity. The gear, the reputation, the scores, I built my whole life around being that guy. He swallowed. And when I saw you with that M110 in that soft case, I didn't see a shooter. I saw a threat to everything I'd built. So I tried to make you small. Because if you were small, I could stay big. The honesty of it hit the surrounding crowd like a physical force. Men who'd been listening shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had laughed along with Wade that morning. Some of them had called her somebody's daughter. The shame wasn't just Wade's, it was collective. Kira studied him, the way she studied wind, reading the movements, the patterns, the truth beneath the surface. You're a hell of a shooter, Harlan, she said. 7 for 7 is no joke. Nobody on this range should take that away from you. 7 for 7 doesn't mean much when someone does 8 for 8 with a borrowed rifle and 1 bullet. It means you can hit what you aim at under pressure. That's not nothing, that's everything. She extended her hand. You just forgot something. Wade gripped her hand, hard, the grip of a man holding onto a lifeline. What did I forget, Sergeant Major? The gear doesn't make the warrior. The warrior makes the gear matter. Wade's eyes closed. He nodded. Once. Twice. Like he was absorbing the words through his skin. Yes, ma'am. You know what the difference is between 7 and 8, Harlan? Ma'am? It's not the rifle. It's not the caliber. It's not the $22,000. She released his hand. The difference is that I've failed more times than you've tried. I've missed shots that should have hit. I've frozen on triggers. I've blown calculations that a first-year student would have caught. Every single failure taught me something your success never could. Wade's eyes widened. He hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected the woman he'd mocked to stand here and hand him the most valuable lesson of his career with the same calm she'd used to dismantle his ego. Failure is the tuition, Kira said. Excellence is the degree. You don't get one without paying the other. She looked him in the eye. Now go teach someone else that lesson. You've got the platform. Use it. Wade stood there for a moment, processing. The crowd watched a man being rebuilt in real time, the old architecture of ego and swagger being demolished, replaced by something quieter, stronger, built on different foundations. Yes, ma'am, he said. I will. He turned, walked back toward his firing position, but his walk was different now. The strut was gone. In its place, something more grounded, more honest. The walk of a man who just learned at 40 years old that the most important battle he'd ever fight was against himself. The crowd eventually dispersed. The sun began its descent toward the mountains. The heat broke, not much, but enough to remind the men on the range that even the desert has mercy sometimes. Kira was packing her gear when Cole approached. He'd been standing back, giving her space, waiting for the right moment, or maybe just working up the courage to say what he needed to say. Sergeant Major, she looked up. Chief, Lily's birthday is in October. Kira paused, hand still on her rifle case. Lily? My daughter. She was 6 weeks old when your voice came through that radio. 6 weeks old, and I'd never held her. Cole's voice cracked. He caught it, rebuilt it. I held her for the first time 3 weeks after you pulled us out. 3 weeks. She was 2 months old, and she grabbed my finger and then looked at me like she'd been waiting. He stepped closer. She's 7 now, and she's very particular about her birthday pancakes. Despite everything, despite the weight of the day and the years and the secrets, Kira almost smiled. Pancakes? Dinosaur shapes. She says round pancakes are boring. She sounds smart. She's the smartest person I know. Cole's voice was steady now, grounded in something that went beyond gratitude. She exists because of you. My marriage exists because of you. Every Christmas, every birthday, every Tuesday morning when I burn the pancake edges and she complains, all of that exists because a woman I'd never met decided that 11 strangers were worth dying for. Kira was quiet for a long moment. She exists because you had something worth fighting for, Chief. I just made sure you got to keep it. That's the most important thing anyone's ever done for me. It was my job. It was more than ever, and you know it. Kira looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who'd spent 7 years carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down. October? October 15th, we're doing dinosaur pancakes. You should come. For the first time in 7 years, for the first time since she collapsed on a frozen ridge and woken up in a hospital with no memory of how she got there, Kira Ashford felt something shift inside her chest. A door opening, a light coming in. Send me the address, Chief. Cole's face broke into a smile. Real, unguarded, the smile of a man who'd finally found what he'd been looking for. I will. 6 months later, at the Marine Scout Sniper School in Quantico, Wade Harlan stood before a classroom of 28 students. He held up a small spiral notebook, worn, edges frayed, pages dense with handwriting that wasn't his. This cost $3 at a gas station, he said. The wisdom inside it is worth more than every piece of equipment in this building combined. He opened it, showed the pages, wind tables, mirage patterns, temperature coefficients. This belonged to the best shooter I've ever seen, an Army Sergeant Major who taught me more in 10 minutes than I'd learned in 15 years of thinking I was the best. He looked at his students, 28 faces, young, hungry, some of them already carrying the same swagger he'd carried at their age. First day of every cycle, I tell this story, and I'll keep telling it until the day I retire. He set the notebook down. The gear doesn't make the warrior makes the gear matter. That's the lesson. Learn it now or learn it the hard way. A student raised his hand. Master Sergeant, what happened to her? Wade smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in a classroom in years. She's teaching the next generation, same as me, same as all of us should be. He picked up the notebook. Now, let's talk about wind. General Grayson found Kira at the parking lot that evening in Nevada, loading her gear into the Silverado. The sun was touching the mountains now. The sky had turned the color of a bruise. purple and orange, and the deep, aching red that only desert sunsets produce. Walk with me, Sergeant Major. They walked away from the trucks, away from the range, into the empty desert where nobody could hear them. You know why I brought you here, Grayson said. To shoot. To be seen. There's a difference. Kira said nothing. She knew where this was going. She'd been avoiding it for 7 years. You've been invisible long enough, Kira. The classification on Hellman was necessary. The work you've done since, the protocols, the field manuals, the training programs, all of it classified, all of it invisible. You've changed how this military fights from the shadows. He stopped walking, turned to face her. And nobody knows your name. I didn't do it for my name, sir. I know, that's exactly why your name matters. He straightened, the posture of a man about to make an offer he'd been planning for a long time. I'm retiring in 18 months. When I leave, I'm recommending you for command of the Joint Special Operations Marksmanship Program. Every sniper school, every precision rifle program, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, all of it. Kira's eyes widened. Sir, that's a general officer billet? Yes, traditionally. But tradition is what got us a firing line full of men who couldn't see past a $45 rifle case. He smiled, small, knowing. Tradition needs to evolve. You're the evolution. I'm a sergeant major. You're the most qualified person in the United States military for that job, and we both know it. The question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you'll let yourself be seen doing it. The question sat between them. Heavy. Real. Kira looked back toward the range. Toward the firing line where she'd made the impossible shot. Toward Cole Rennick, who was talking with a group of operators who'd been strangers that morning. Toward Wade Harlan, who was writing in a notebook with the intensity of a man trying to capture something before it escaped. When I was on that mountain, she said quietly, I didn't think about being seen. I thought about those 11 men. I thought about their families. I thought about the daughter Chief Rennick had never held. She paused, and I decided that the only thing that mattered was making sure he got to hold her. And he did. And he did, because I stayed invisible, because I was in a place nobody expected, doing something nobody authorized. Nobody was looking at me when it mattered most. She turned to face Grayson. That's what I do, sir. I operate in the spaces people don't look. I'm effective because I'm invisible. You were effective because you're extraordinary. The invisibility was circumstance, not strategy. Kira started to respond, stopped, considered. You're asking me to become something I've never been. I'm asking you to become what you already are, just louder. The sun touched the mountains. The sky deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a sound as old as the desert itself. I'll think about it, sir. That's all I ask. 3 months later, Kira Ashford stood in front of a classroom. The general had retired exactly as planned. His last act before leaving had been to pin the Legion of Merit on Kira's collar. The first time in history that medal had been awarded to a sniper for actions that officially never happened. I told you when you were 16 that the Army would find a place for you, he'd said at the ceremony. I was wrong. You didn't find a place. You built one. Now Kira stood in that place. 30 students, mixed service, mixed gender, 7 women, 23 men, the first integrated advanced sniper cohort in American military history. She'd accepted Grayson's offer. Not because she wanted to be seen, not because she craved recognition or needed validation, because she'd realized something on that firing range in Nevada, something that had been true all along, but that she'd never let herself acknowledge. The invisible work mattered, but so did the visible work. So did standing in front of a room full of young soldiers and showing them, not telling them, showing them, what was possible. Marksmanship is not about the rifle. She picked up the M110K1. Cole's gift, the rifle that had made the ghost shot. It lived in her classroom now, mounted on the wall with a brass plaque beneath it. The ghost shot, 2,100 meters. SGM Kira Ashford, USA, Nellis Range Complex, Nevada, July 2026. This is a tool, she continued, capable, well made, but it has no value without the operator. The rifle is an extension of your will. The bullet is your message. Your job is to deliver that message with absolute clarity under conditions that are trying to make you fail. A young male student raised his hand. Confident posture, easy smile. The kind of smile that said he'd been the best in every room he'd walked into. Sergeant Major, I've been shooting since I was 8. Won 3 state competitions. I'm kind of a natural. The classroom went quiet. The other students recognized the danger before he did. Some of them had heard the stories. They knew what was coming. Kira looked at him, not with anger, not with contempt, with the steady measuring gaze of someone who'd heard this exact sentence from 100 men and watched reality educate every single one of them. What's your name? Specialist Webb, Sergeant Major. You think you're a natural, Webb? Yes, Sergeant Major. My instructors all said, wrong. One word, flat, final, the sound of a door closing. I'm not a natural anything. I've fired approximately 450,000 rounds. I've spent over 12,000 hours behind a scope. I've logged wind data in 73 different geographic locations across 4 continents. I've missed more shots than you've attempted. She walked toward him, not aggressive, not threatening, just closing the distance the way a teacher closes distance to make sure the lesson lands. Natural talent is a lie, Webb, a comfortable story people tell themselves to avoid confronting the truth. What truth, Sergeant Major? That excellence is built, not born. That mastery requires suffering. That the difference between good and great is 10,000 hours of work when nobody is watching and nobody is clapping. Webb looked down. His confidence didn't collapse. It reshaped. The difference between breaking and bending. Kira saw it happen, recognized it. She'd seen that same reshaping in her own reflection 20 years ago, standing on a range in Montana after a 2-star general told her the Army might have a place for her if she worked hard enough. You have potential, Webb, real potential. I can see it in your hands, in how you hold the rifle, in the fact that you're sitting in this chair at all. But potential without humility is just ego waiting to fail. And ego on a battlefield gets people killed. Webb swallowed, nodded. Yes, Sergeant Major. Good. Prove me right. Then another hand, slower, hesitant. A young woman in the second row, brown hair, Texas accent when she spoke. Sergeant Major, what if people doubt us? What if they say we don't belong? The classroom shifted. 22 men and 6 other women leaned in. This wasn't an academic question. Every person in this room had faced some version of it. The doubt, the dismissal, the assumption that they weren't enough. Kira walked to her, knelt, not to condescend, to connect eye to eye, equal to equal. What's your name? Private Holloway, Sergeant Major. Holloway, look at me. Holloway looked up, brown eyes, wide, young, afraid, not of the training but of the world that waited on the other side of it. Other people's doubt is not your burden to carry. It's theirs. Your only job, your only responsibility is to be so undeniably excellent that their doubt becomes irrelevant. Kira stood, not by arguing, not by defending yourself, not by explaining or justifying or asking permission. She picked up the rifle. By demonstrating, so consistently, so relentlessly, so quietly and completely, that reality forces them to change their mind. She looked at the young woman. You don't convince people with words, Holloway. You convince them with results they can't explain away. She went prone. The class gathered. The familiar ritual, breathing, stillness. The sacred geometry of a shooter becoming one with the weapon. Target at 1,500 meters. Wind left to right, 9 miles per hour, gusting to 14. She didn't use a calculator, didn't check a chart, closed her eyes for 3 seconds, ran the numbers in the space behind her eyelids, where instinct and mathematics lived in the same room. Opened her eyes, found the target, breath in, breath out, natural pause, press, crack, 3 seconds of silence. Then the distant ring of steel echoing across the valley like a bell calling the faithful to prayer. Your turn, Holloway. The young woman's face went pale. Sergeant Major, I've never shot past 1,100 meters. Then today you learn. Holloway's first shot missed by 3 feet. Her second shot missed by 1. Her third shot, after Kira adjusted her position, corrected her breathing, and reminded her to trust the first number her gut gave her, rang steel. The class erupted. Holloway sat up, eyes enormous, disbelief and joy colliding on her face like two waves meeting in open water. Kira smiled, small, real, the rarest thing any of them had ever seen on her face. Welcome to the profession, Holloway. That October, Kira drove to a small house in the suburbs of Virginia Beach. October 15th, Lily Rennick's 7th birthday. Cole opened the door before she could knock. He'd been watching for her. You came. I said I would. I know, He shook his head, smiled. Come in. She's been asking about you all day. The house was warm, lived in, photos on the walls, Cole in uniform, a woman with kind eyes, a little girl growing up frame by frame, a little girl who was now standing in the kitchen doorway, staring at Kira with an intensity that reminded her of herself at that age. Daddy says you're the reason I exist. Kira knelt down, eye to eye, the way she'd knelt in front of Holloway that morning. No, sweetheart, your daddy is the reason you exist. I just made sure he came home. Lily considered this. 7 years old, blonde hair, Cole's eyes. Daddy says you're the best shooter in the whole world. I practiced a lot. Can you teach me? Kira looked up at Cole. He was standing in the doorway, spatula in hand, pancake burning on the griddle behind him. His eyes were bright. He nodded. Kira looked back at Lily. I'd be honored. Lily's face split into a grin. She grabbed Kira's hand and pulled her toward the kitchen. Come on, Daddy's burning the pancakes again. He always burns the edges. I do not always, Cole started. You do, Daddy, every time. Kira let herself be pulled into the kitchen, into the warmth, into the light, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt home. 1 year later, Kira stood on a firing range in Montana, not Nellis, not a military installation. The same range where her father had taught her to shoot 30 years ago. Beside her stood Lily Rennick, 8 years old now, holding a .22 rifle that was almost too big for her. Behind them, Cole watched with his arms crossed and a quiet smile on his face. Remember what I told you, Kira said. Breathe in, breathe out, find the pause. The pause between, Lily said. That's where the shot lives. Good. Now look at the target. Don't stare at it. Look through it. Like I'm seeing something behind it. Exactly. Lily settled, steadied, found the pause. Kira? Yes? What if I miss? Kira smiled, reached into her pocket, pulled out a length of faded green paracord, sun-bleached, worn, older than Lily's father. She tied it around the barrel of Lily's rifle. Then you adjust, you learn, and you try again. What's that? Something my father gave me a long time ago. He said one day I'd need something to hold on to. Something to remind me where I came from and what I'm made of. She looked at the paracord, at the history it carried, at the weight it had borne. Now it's yours. Lily's eyes went wide. But it's yours. I can't take... You're not taking it. I'm giving it. Kira smiled. There's a difference. Lily looked at the paracord on her rifle, then at Kira, then back at the target, 300 yards away. I won't miss, she said. I know you won't, sweetheart. Lily breathed in, breathed out, found the pause, pressed the trigger. And 300 yards away, steel rang. Cole walked up beside Kira as Lily ran down range to see her target. You gave her the paracord. It was time. Your father gave you that. I know. Kira watched Lily jumping up and down beside the target, celebrating her first hit. And now I've given it to her. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. What is? Kira was quiet for a moment. Excellence, she said finally. You build it, you live it, and then when the time comes, you pass it on. She looked at Cole. That's the whole point. That's why any of it matters. Not the shots, not the records, not the recognition. She looked back at Lily. The legacy. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he put his arm around Kira's shoulders. Carefully, respectfully, the way you touch someone who's become family. Thank you, he said, for everything. For Hellman, for the shot, For this, for all of it. Kira leaned into him, just slightly, just enough. You're welcome, Chief. They stood there together, watching Lily run back toward them with her father's eyes and her mother's smile and a piece of faded green paracord tied to her rifle. And somewhere in a memory that lived between heartbeats, the ghost of a young woman who'd held back an army smiled. Because excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to exist. And when the time comes, when it truly matters, it needs to be willing to be seen.